Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
As you know, Aaron, I'm a pretty boring person. I just, I like in one particular thing, which we're going to talk about today. I just like kind of doing things the default way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably a little unique in terms of developers in that I tend to not have strong opinions about things. I mean, not always, but sometimes, even here, I'm being boring that I can't take a side whether I have strong opinions or not. But I think there is actually some benefit in sort of sticking with the defaults. Now, that could be in your code editor, in your terminal, in your framework of choice. All sorts of different ways you could apply this. But I think there's a benefit in sticking with the defaults unless you have a very specific reason not to. And I'm just using that to kind of kick it off. I think you know that about me. And here's your chance to kind of vent your frustration with me about that personality quirk.
One of the things that you mentioned about keeping with the defaults that I have seen that's worked pretty well. Well, a couple, one is then if you have default project, new developers come in and they generally know how it works. And we've talked about that before. Stop making stuff so complicated.
Right.
You're not the only developer ever that's going to touch this. The other thing is you're a fan of using Laravel Shift to upgrade your projects. And one of the things you'd mentioned is like try not to change your default configuration files because it makes that harder to upgrade. Maybe if you're going to have some unique configurations, put them in a separate file that's maybe named after your app instead of putting it in the app one.
Yeah.
So I've seen that as a benefit, but there is a specific. I mean, if you turn off defaults, you have to have a specific reason, a repeatable, rational reason. I think to do that. And I wasn't always that way either. Like I thought I knew better, but you have to have a specific, repeatable, rational reason to turn off those defaults. And I can think of one as an example.
Okay.
When I run a PHP unit. I tend to turn on by default the functionality to stop on failure.
Okay.
So a lot of projects are set that doesn't. So I think that the concept or the idea is that you'll run all your unit tests and, if 3 fail and the rest are passing, great. You only have 3 to fix, the rest of your tests pass. And even there's functionality inside a PHP unit, I think that you can turn on like, run only my failures. There's sort of a caching functionality. So, theoretically, it should make the test suite go faster, as you're developing and working through it. What I found the first time it really got to me, but then I found it a few more times, is that sometimes the failure is a legitimate failure and it stems from the fact that you've written your code incorrectly. And then your other tests that are passing, even in other parts of your test suite, are passing accidentally, or you've written those tests incorrectly. So when you go and do that, and then you change your code, is PHP unit and all those tools going to be smart enough to know to run the other falsely passing tests?
No,
it's not.
It will not.
But if you have, let's just say you have something that always returns true, and luckily you have some tests around that check for the true and the false state, and those are failing. I don't want to move on. I don't want to move on beyond that because there might be code later on that's testing a couple of different flows of that in a more integrative way that is accidentally passing, and then it's just gonna look past. So that's kind of like one of the defaults that I picked that turn off or on.
Yeah, and I also accept that deviation from the defaults, and at first I think maybe we even argued about this a little bit at first because. Just to kind of take the other side for a little bit, I could see some limited circumstances where you might want to see all the failures. For example, if something fails in CI, maybe theoretically it would be nicer to see that these 4 tests failed instead of just like which of the first failed. But certainly,
I got to interrupt there because does it really matter? As soon as one fails,
no.
I want my CI to immediately stop because I don't want it doing any more work. Yeah. And when CI fails on the very first thing, that's the key to me that I need to bring this project back into my local state and work through the issues. Right. So I see what you're saying, but I disagree.
And I was just kind of like maybe a stand-in for somebody listening to this and yelling at the their Zune or whatever they're listening to this on. But
Zune.
but yeah, I mean, you make a good point because like technically, if you're on a CI platform, GitHub Actions or something, you are paying per minute. Like now, maybe you
Mhm.
never exceed your free tier, and it doesn't matter. But like, yeah, why run an extra few minutes? The other scenario, and again, I'm just kind of like reaching for things to have you
Smash them
rebut.
down.
I'm thinking of a particular project where the tests were kind of slow and it, maybe took like 9-10 minutes and then it fails at like 97%. You're like, oh, so you still go fix it and then you rerun it again and now it fails at 98%. So that was like one time where I think it would have been nice to know that there was maybe two failures lurking for me instead of just the one. But that's kind of an edge case because number one, make your tests faster. And number two, that doesn't happen that often that it's like right at the end, two different
Right.
times.
And I can see what you're talking about with that, but it still suffers from the same thing. What if that
Yeah.
test at 98% was something that affects something else?
Sure.
And you need to remember to run those again. The other thing about, I guess we're just really digging in on this particular topic. The other thing about it is with like PHP unit and your test base or your class based tests, it runs in a predictable fashion.
Hmm.
So in a predictable order.
Yeah.
So in that case, you are probably like, depending on how you have your tests organized or whatever, you probably could have ran like at a folder level, like, run PHP unit space tests features admin slash blogs, if it was like that was the last thing or whatever, and just run those 4 tests or those 5 tests that are in that folder
Yeah.
again while you're developing and fixing those issues,
Hmm.
and as well as like it can't be overstated enough that just target the test that's failing and run it over and over until it passes.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but in case I'll be honest, in cases like you're talking about with that, I generally have a good feeling that my other tests are going to continue to pass.
Hmm.
So that's why we have CI set up as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
So I'll test over and over that section, and then I'll push it out to CI and go. If it fails, I'll just find a way to blame Joel.
That's right. Yeah. He approved this PR. He shouldn't have done that. Yeah, I guess so to take your side again, because I do agree with you. But the other thing too is like let's say you just did a major version upgrade for Laravel or one of your core packages or something. There's a good chance it'll break a bunch of tests. And I think it would be pointless to run your whole test suite locally and see like, oh, like 84 of my 1,500 tests
Hmm.
failed. When in reality, maybe it's all because like the translation string for a particular validation rule changed from must to may or something like that. And so it's going to be kind of a boilerplate find and replace thing that'll fix a bunch of tests anyways. And it's just, it's like, oh my God, I have 84 failing tests. And no, really, you probably have like two or three things you need to fix.
Right. I like when you pull from the archives just to demonstrate to listeners that you've been around for a while.
Mhm.
That error changing from meta
Oh,
or
yeah.
from meta must. I remember
Hmm.
that was a couple of Laravel versions ago. Nice,
Yeah.
nice, nice little humble drop there.
Yeah. That's what I like to do. A nice callback. So Aaron, I'm glad you picked this particular example of PHP unit just to show I'm not unreasonable and I'm not like strongly opinionated that you must use the defaults. There are times where it makes sense to deviate,
Hmm.
but here's where it boils down to for me, and this kind of default path it isn't really about being boring or vanilla, but it is about not fiddling with things if you don't need to.
Right.
So I know there are people that take great pride in mapping custom shortcuts for PHP Storm to do all sorts of things. And, that's fine. That's just not me. That's not where I seek productivity or seek to get better as a programmer. I find like just kind of sticking with the defaults suits me pretty well for like the 95% case. And then the 5%, yeah, tweak it. If you have a reason, if you're bumping up against something, I'm not afraid to change it. I just don't go looking for things to change.
Hmm.
If I were to ask you, Aaron, what season are you? Would you have any idea what I'm talking about?
uh, hey girl, what's your season?
Yeah, sure, along those lines.
Well, yeah, I immediately, well, I have two thoughts really. I would go
Okay.
either fall because I like to have like a sweatshirt on,
Mhm.
or is this a dating show? Or I would say garlic
Got
because
oh,
because you can put me on everything.
I didn't say what season do you like. I said what season
Oh,
are you? Okay, so
yeah.
I'm gonna go back to my
Well, then
younger
I'm
days.
winter. I'm winter because I'm just cold and frigid, and no one likes me, but you put up with me.
So before my days where I programmed professionally, I had like an IT business where I'd go set up computers for companies and fix stuff. And one of my
You were working on computers in '53.
oh my goodness. Yep, exactly. Um, and one of the customers was a women's clothing store.
Hmm.
And this was in the late 90s. And there was this thing where a person has a season as like their color palette, like what
Mm.
shades of makeup they should wear and what color clothing they should wear. And so it was a whole thing that I had no exposure to until I'm just like sitting there like working on their cash register computer and I'm hearing these discussions and I'm like, this is really weird. Okay. So just to kind of set the stage for this company I was working at, I have sort of an embarrassing story to share, and I just thought you would get some enjoyment out of it. This clothing store next door, there was like a hair salon or something that went out of business. So they expanded into that space and it became like a day spa or something. And so I was over
Mm.
there setting up a new computer, and the woman who owns the business was training people that were going to work here. And so she's like telling them this and telling them, you got to do this and you got to do that. And she's like, Joel, this is perfect. Can you come over here for a second? I'm like, okay. So I come over there. So picture the owner of the store, maybe like three or four younger women that are going to work there. And she's like, we want to do a treatment on your nose. And so they take my head and they put like this cream, or I don't remember even what it was. But at first they're like looking like, look at his skin. It's like this type of skin. And it's that. And I'm like, I was getting extremely uncomfortable. And so this just popped up into my memory the other day because I'm like, that was probably one of my weirdest on the job experiences, but I did survive it.
That's what I like about programming, though, is you get to experience and learn a lot of different things.
It's true.
I worked for a client who worked for I think I can say this, worked for Boots, which is a pretty big retailer in UK and other places.
Okay.
And we were I went to work for this company because I thought I would be able to work on Subaru stuff. That's
Mm.
kind of how they sold it. And I had a Subaru at the time. I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, you're going to work on Boots. I'm like, what? Specifically, you're going to work on their makeup stuff. I'm like, what?
Mm.
But as much as I joke about it, it was actually really interesting. I had no idea all of the business logic behind it. We were building these things where they lay out the shelves in the makeup section by shelves, and then what are called cassettes. So each individual shelf has like 3 to 6 different sections, and then there's slots inside of there. And it was all like actually organized by like the makeup companies and
Mm.
brands and stuff would jockey for position based off eyeline and all that kind of stuff. And we were building the interface so people could send this season's version of the makeup layout.
Oh.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, see, we do learn a lot being out there
Yeah.
in the world.
Have you ever wanted to dress like Joel? Please don't, but you can learn like Joel.
We've published some free resources to master Laravel at our site called masteringlaravel.io.